The messenger arrives before dawn. His face says everything before his mouth does: betrayal, loss, disaster. In a single morning, your plans collapse, your status means nothing, and the people around you look to you for strength you're not sure you have. So what actually holds a human being together when fortune turns violent? Seneca believed the answer was only four things, four virtues, four inner disciplines strong enough to outlast chaos, power, grief, and fear. But first, let me tell you why this matters more today than ever. Imagine Rome at the height of its power. Marble temples, crowded forums, senators in polished sandals debating order, war, and empire while, underneath it all, ambition coils like a snake. This was not a calm world. It was a machine built on uncertainty. One accusation could destroy a career. One emperor's mood could end a life. And in the middle of that world stood Seneca, statesman, playwright, political operator, teacher of emperors, and one of the sharpest minds in Stoic philosophy. He was not writing from a monastery. He was writing from inside the fire. He knew wealth. He knew influence. He knew exile. He knew what it meant to rise to the center of power and then feel the blade of power turn back toward him. That matters, because ancient wisdom is cheap when it comes from people who never had anything to lose. Seneca had everything to lose: reputation, security, position, life itself. And what he wrote was not abstract philosophy for bored intellectuals. It was survival training for the soul. The Stoics argued that character is not built by comfort. It is revealed by pressure. And at the center of Stoic thought were four cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Not as decorative moral ideals, as architecture, as the internal structure of a human being who refuses to collapse. Here's the striking part. Most people think self-improvement is about optimization, better routines, better focus, better habits, better performance. Seneca would say all of that is secondary. If your character is weak, your efficiency only makes you dangerous faster. And that is why this still matters in the age of modern stoicism, burnout, and endless distraction. Because the real question isn't how to become more productive. It's how to become unshakable without becoming numb. What Seneca saw, and what Marcus Aurelius would later echo in his own private writings, is that a life without virtue is not freedom. It only feels like freedom at first. What he wrote next changed everything. Let's start with the first virtue, wisdom. Not intelligence, not information, not being the smartest person in the room. Stoic wisdom means seeing reality clearly, especially when your ego desperately wants to distort it. Seneca knew that most human suffering begins with bad judgment, not events themselves, but the stories we build around them. He put it with brutal precision: we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. That line survives because it humiliates us a little. It exposes how much of our pain is self-authored. The argument in your head before the meeting, the disaster you rehearse before it happens, the insult you keep reliving, the future you fear as if it were already here. Seneca's insight is almost surgical. Your mind can become a theater of invented misery. And here's where most people get it wrong. They hear Stoic philosophy and assume it means suppressing emotion. That is lazy philosophy. Stoicism is not emotional anesthesia. It is disciplined perception. The Stoic does not deny fear, he interrogates it. He asks, what is actually happening and what am I adding to it? This is why wisdom comes first. Without it, courage becomes recklessness, justice becomes self-righteousness, temperance becomes performative self-denial. Wisdom is the faculty that puts everything else in order. It teaches you to distinguish what is under your control from what never was, and that distinction is the beginning of freedom. Think about modern life. Your attention is harvested for profit. Your outrage is monetized. Your insecurity is studied, refined, and fed back to you in algorithmic form. In that environment, wisdom is not passive. It is resistance. To think clearly today is an act of rebellion. And yet Seneca pushes further. Wisdom is not just about avoiding false suffering. It's about refusing to confuse external success with internal excellence. A person can be rich and foolish, famous and foolish, efficient and foolish. Some of the most celebrated people in the world are simply high-functioning slaves to impulse. That statement will bother some people. Good, it should. Because Stoic philosophy forces a question modern culture hates. What if achievement without self-mastery is just a more glamorous form of weakness? And there's something even more shocking. Seneca did not believe wisdom was proven when life is easy. It appears when reality refuses to cooperate, when the diagnosis comes, when the relationship breaks, when humiliation arrives publicly. Then we find out whether we were living by reason or merely borrowing confidence from luck. The second virtue is justice, and this is where Stoicism becomes far more demanding than most modern self-help. Justice, for Seneca, is not just obeying laws or performing kindness when it's convenient. It is the recognition that you are not a private island. You belong to a human community. Your thoughts may be your own, but your actions ripple outward. To be just is to live in a way that does not corrupt the whole. Seneca writes, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." That sounds gentle, almost too gentle, but don't miss how radical it is. Stoic justice is not sentiment, it is obligation. It means the stranger, the rival, the servant, the difficult family member, the colleague who irritates you, all of them are arenas for virtue. You do not get to be noble only with people who are easy to love. And here's a controversial claim. Most people are not exhausted because life is hard. They are exhausted because they are divided against themselves. They say they value honesty, then live strategically. They say they care about people, then use them transactionally. They say they want peace, then feed on resentment. Injustice toward others eventually becomes civil war within the self. Seneca understood that character fragmentation is expensive. Every compromise leaves residue. Every act against conscience taxes the mind. This is why so many outwardly successful people feel strangely hollow, not because they failed to get enough, because they betrayed too much. What would happen if you treated justice not as a public virtue, but as an internal alignment? What if being fair, truthful, and humane was not mainly for other people, but for preserving your own soul? This is where it gets interesting. Justice in Stoic philosophy also means accepting your role in the larger order of things. Marcus Aurelius, deeply influenced by this tradition, repeatedly reminds himself that humans are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids. Seneca agrees in spirit. The good life cannot be built out of private greed. If your self-improvement journey makes you more narcissistic, more cold, more obsessed with your own optimization, it is not wisdom. It is vanity wearing philosophical clothing. Practical application: start painfully small. Keep your word when it costs you. Speak truth without adding cruelty. Refuse the cheap pleasure of contempt. Assume that every ordinary interaction is moral training. The way you answer a message, the way you speak to service workers, the way you behave when no status can be gained from being decent. That is where Stoic character is built. But justice alone can still collapse under pressure, because knowing the good is one thing, enduring pain for it is another. Courage is the third cardinal virtue and maybe the most misunderstood. Most people imagine courage as dramatic, battlefields, speeches, public acts of defiance. But Seneca points somewhere much less glamorous and much more terrifying: the private endurance of suffering without surrendering your principles. Courage, in Stoic terms, is not aggression. It is steadiness under threat. Seneca writes, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." That is not motivational fluff. It is a direct challenge to the comfort-addicted part of you, the part that assumes resistance means stop, the part that interprets inconvenience as injustice. Seneca says no, difficulty is often the forge. If you never endure friction, you never discover your structure. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Modern culture praises resilience constantly while designing lives that make resilience less likely. Convenience has become a religion. Everything faster, softer, easier. But a person protected from all strain becomes fragile in places they cannot see. Then life applies pressure and they call the pressure unfair. Do you see why this matters? Courage is not just for catastrophe, it is for ordinary life. For telling the truth when a lie would be easier. For staying with grief instead of distracting yourself into spiritual numbness. For admitting you were wrong. For beginning again after humiliation. For refusing to let suffering make you smaller. Now add the fourth virtue, temperance. This is the one modern people tend to dismiss because it sounds restrictive. Moderation, restraint, limits, not exactly thrilling. But Seneca understood something profound. If courage helps you face external pain, temperance helps you withstand internal appetite. One confronts threat from the outside, the other governs chaos from within. He writes, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." There it is, the entire spiritual disease of modern consumer culture in one sentence. Poverty is not only a condition of possessions, it can be a condition of desire. You can own more than emperors and still live in psychological scarcity if your cravings never end. This is the emotional peak of Seneca's four virtues. Wisdom teaches you to see clearly. Justice teaches you to live rightly with others. Courage teaches you to endure what you fear. Temperance teaches you that if you cannot say no to yourself, none of the other virtues are stable. Ask yourself, who is more free, the person who gets every impulse satisfied, or the person who no longer needs to obey every impulse? That question cuts to the center of Stoic philosophy. And this is the synthesis. The four cardinal virtues are not separate personality traits. They are one structure viewed from four angles. Wisdom sees the path. Justice keeps the path human. Courage walks the path through pain. Temperance prevents you from abandoning the path for pleasure. Remove one and the others distort. With all four together, Stoic character becomes more than discipline. It becomes integrity under pressure. This is why Seneca still matters in modern Stoicism, in self-improvement, in philosophy, and in the spiritual confusion of the present age. Not because he offers hacks, because he offers standards. He asks not, "How can I feel better immediately?" but "What kind of person am I becoming through this?" And maybe that is the question you've been avoiding. Go back to the opening image, the messenger at dawn, the bad news, the collapse of plans, the moment when status, money, charm, and cleverness suddenly become secondary. What remains then, according to Seneca, only character, only the habits of soul you practiced before the crisis arrived. That is why the four virtues matter more today than ever, because your test may not look Roman, it may look like burnout, betrayal, a layoff, a diagnosis, a public failure, a marriage under strain, a season where your mind becomes your enemy, and in that moment, you will not rise to the level of your intentions, you will fall to the level of your character. So here is the challenge. For the next 7 days, choose one virtue each day and practice it deliberately. One day of wisdom, catch your imagination inventing suffering and return to facts. One day of justice, perform one act of honesty or kindness that benefits no image of yourself. One day of courage, do the thing you have been avoiding because it makes you uncomfortable. One day of temperance, deny one impulse, not because it is evil, but because you refuse to be ruled. Then repeat. Watch what happens to your mind. Watch what happens to your relationships. Watch how much of your anxiety was confusion, how much of your conflict was ego, how much of your weakness was untrained desire. Most people will spend their entire lives trying to control circumstances while neglecting the only thing they were ever truly responsible for. Seneca offers a harsher and more liberating path. Govern yourself, and fortune loses much of its power. So drop your interpretation in the comments. Which of the four virtues is hardest for you right now? Wisdom, justice, courage, or temperance, and why? The best answers always come from this community. If this shifted something in your thinking, subscribe. We go deeper every week into Stoic philosophy, ancient wisdom, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and the ideas that can still remake a life. Character is what remains when everything else is taken away.